Good afternoon. Wow, this is all. I have to get used to so much technology. Yeah, okay. But that, okay, good. Okay, here I am. I'm Hilde Tubex from the University of WA. And while we are situated on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people in Perth, today I want to pay my respect to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and respect the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and my respect to all the people, the Aboriginal people here in the room. The project that I'm going to talk about today was funded by the WA, by WAXAR, which is kind of the WA version of Boxar, but then the baby version of it because it's a lot younger. And as usual, everything that went right is due to the department and everything that wrong is due to me. That's how we work, and it works perfectly. So I'm talking about recidivism as in return to prison. That was targeted research that I was asked to do by the department because we all know that the majority of the people that are in prison have been in prison before, 60% according to the ABS. And there are some varieties between the states and territories, but in general, it's quite bad. And that is no different in WA. So these data are from 2022, and they had in that year about 61% of return rate, and the majority of them is, or 72% of them is within 24 months. And while my talk today is not only about Indigenous people that return to the prison, my talk is about Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, about women and about men. That was a request from the department. But in WA, as in other Australian jurisdictions, the return of Aboriginal people is, again, a story of overrepresentation. 80% of the Indigenous Australians had been in prison before, while it is about 49% of the non-Indigenous people. So the research project in general is quite complex. I'm only going to talk about the first part of it, which is the prison survey. On top of the prison survey, we had more and shorter surveys that were handed out as part of the DUMA project. That is the Drug Use Monitoring Australia project. And that resulted in about 227 more surveys. Then we did interviews in the prison, and finally there is to be a lived experience forum to be held in the coming weeks. So a couple of words about these parts before I actually turn to the prison survey, which is the topic of today. So DUMA is conducted in WA on an annual basis, I think. ECU has a contract with the department that they can hand out surveys on the use of drugs with people that arrive in the watch house. As a consequence, they have to allow other researchers to slip some questions into their survey, and I had the opportunity to do the same when it came to return to prison. For now, I treat that survey differently because it's a bit of a different population and a shorter survey, so we'll have to see later on how I integrate that in the report. I just finished interviewing people in the prison. I had the opportunity to talk to 62 prisoners spread over the metropolitan area and the regions in WA, spread over men and women, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And you can see the distribution there. And then, because I think it's important to not only look at people that return to the prison, but also to talk to the people that did not return to the prison, we will have a lived experience forum in the coming weeks, and that is supported by the Justice Reform Initiative in WA. So these are the parts of the research that I'm not going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the survey, but I will elaborate a little bit on the learnings from the interviews. Of course, they're still fresh in my mind. So, and they do align, and they give a broader context on what we found in the surveys. Talking about the surveys, there is a way of research that I am less familiar with. The people that know me know that I mainly work qualitative in the communities and with indigenous people, and a lot of the time with women. This project is a bit broader and was supported by an honor student who worked for me as RAs. But I was actually surprised that when you just hand out, it was 3-4 page survey with very broad questions and a couple of open questions, which they could return in a sealed envelope, anonymous a sealed envelope, how much you get out of it. The stories came through, and I always work with quotes, so you will see that later on in the presentation. When I talk about my research, I use the voices of the people that have been talking to me in yarning circles, in interviews, and now obviously I thought it worked quite well with the surveys as well. That's the demographics. There's quite a good spread of all the people that we wanted to talk to, I think. And one of the first questions was like, during your previous sentence, did you participate in any offender programs? Because we want to know, what did you do, what worked, what would you need next time for a better outcome? The majority said yes, and of course that is because for early release they need to follow some programs, but we also know that a lot of people, particularly indigenous people, do not go for early release, and therefore also do not take up or do not get the opportunity to have to engage in a program, particularly in the regional prisons in WA. That is a problem because these programs are just not available. Even if there are a requirement to be released, it's either flying yourself to Perth, being away from country and your family and everything that is important to you to complete the program, to have the early release, or to just serve your sentence in full. Most of the programs where they are familiar, if you have the same thing here in New South Wales, Pathways, CCC, and other alcohol and drug-related programs. Then the question was, were these programs of use to you? Now I will need to turn around because that's a little bit too small. So for about 52% of the people said, yes, they were of use. I think it was anonymous. It was in the intimacy of their own cell. I hope that we got honest answers there. Why was it important? Because it helped, and that was mentioned this morning as well, behavioral programs are not necessarily there to change your behavior, but it can provide you with some insights to raise some understanding and motivation triggers. And there's a couple of quotes how people expressed how that kind of programs was helpful for them. A second set of questions was related, you try to organize them a little bit thematically to get a bit better oversight. It helped to understand the impact of that drugs and alcohol had on their lives and how they could engage on the pathway towards being sober. But also more practical things, like it provided me with improved opportunities for employment and learning outcomes. About 11% of them said, well, it helped in a way, but it was not enough, or I couldn't follow it through, or it wasn't there at the right moment, it was not really what I was looking for. And then about 30% of them said, no, it was not helpful for me. Because I wasn't there yet. I wasn't ready for change. I was not interested. It was not scheduled at the right moment for me. I think that's an important one. When people are actually open to learning from these interventions, and also when they can do something with it. If it's too early in the sentence, then it has all evaporated by the time they can actually implement it, and the other way around. Some of them just felt like it was a waste of time and a tick box, or it was not enough to address the complexity of all the issues that they had to deal with after their release. You can have, some of them said, I have a shoebox of certificates, but if I walk out of here and I don't have a home to go to, what am I going to do with it? Then we asked, did you have contact with a transitional support service or reintegration service while you were in the prison? And that is a lot less of them. About 1/3 had been in touch with one of these services. And was it of any help for you after your release? Again, a good majority says like, yes, it was helpful. Sometimes in a very practical way. They got me some money, they helped me for my housing, they gave me a bus ticket to go home. Yeah, they just helped me in a practical way to set my first steps on the way out of the prison. Others said like, no, it was not helpful. The complexity of life once they walk out of the prison is as such that sometimes the support or the services that are there to support, it just feels like an additional burden on them. I didn't have the transport. What do I do with my kids if I have to complete? And I didn't follow through. I fell in the same gap again. It was just in the too hard basket. Why did you return to prison? For the majority of them, that was for a new offense, and then there's a spread of all other sorts of more possible reasons for return to prison. But when we asked them, like, elaborate a bit about that, like, what was the main issue, and then we ordered them as according to their frequency. Drugs was the first one, homelessness the second one, and then alcohol and domestic violence. But we'll look a little bit more into these ones. 2/3 of the population said that it was drug use that brought them back into the prison, and in the majority of the cases that had to do with methamphetamines. Over the research that I've done in WA for the last couple of years, I was absolutely gobsmacked about the frequency and the impact of methamphetamines on young people, on women in remote communities. You can't go remote enough or there will be a huge meth problem. Alcohol and all the rest has become kind of less relevant than when I did this kind of research many years ago. The reason for return, I was homeless. I went back into offending because I didn't have a roof over my head. I went back to the lifestyle of drug addiction. I did not have employment. Employment is often less a matter of income, but to have a reason to get out of your bed, to have a reason to not take drugs, just to get away from the boredom and the other things that you do when you don't have a job. Issues with coping and decision making. I was went back to selling drugs to support my habit and my life. I was desperate for money. I had bills to need paid. But there was also a lot of grief and loss, all the issues that they are confronted with after imprisonment. Family members that have been lost, and Aboriginal people in particular not having had the opportunity to be there and to pay their duties, going back to drugs as a coping mechanism, finding yourself separated from your loved ones and all the issues that come with it, and as a problem-solving matter, going back to the lifestyle and negative peers. My father passed away, I lost my home, I returned to the drugs. I was attending rehab, but then my partner told me that she's been seeing somebody else. All these grief, loss, and anger that then results to one of the only mechanisms that they have access to or that they remember and coping, and that is often alcohol and drug use. I think what is sometimes underestimated in what people, at least the people that have been talking to in the prison, are struggling with throughout their whole lives, which result in a criminal lifestyle and ends up in the prison, is a lack of self-esteem. People have been exposed to so many negative experiences in their life and have been let down at so many occasions by so many people and agencies, that it's very difficult for them to believe in themselves, that there is an alternative, that they have opportunities. That was said in the quotes from Indigenous people, but also not Indigenous people, and that continues through their treatment in the prison. Like, are we being seen like people, or as numbers, as just people that go through the system until the next comes along? After release, we asked how many had a safe place to go to. That's less than half of them. 1/3 had an income, 1/4 had their own home, 1/5 had employment, and about 1/3 had none of all. So, what is the biggest support? For the most of them, that was the family, knowing that these families are not always the strongest and the most stable themselves, so that by the lack of other support services, it's often them that have to drag the person that is released from the prison to, like, in accommodation, but also support in income and in abstain from alcohol and drug use. So that's a big burden on the family as well. What support did you need? Housing, housing, and housing again. All the rest is less important, I think. If you don't have a safe space to put your head on a pillow in the evening, it becomes really hard to survive on the outside. Reflecting on release, what were the main issues? No purpose, no support. I had nothing when I got out, and everybody was just doing drugs and stealing. I was disconnected from everyone. I'm disconnected from the society and from my culture. I needed a transition place in place so that I could get ready for work. I needed accommodation. I needed a house again and again. But there's also other needs that there's, of course, support for job, financial support and needs, giving me a purpose, but maybe even more important, there's also the mental health. It has been mentioned a couple of times today, but people that express the willingness and the need to engage in counseling, to deal with their emotions, with their anger issues, with the scars on their brain. I needed counseling, I needed help with rehabilitation and help remaining drug-free. I needed someone to confide in and able to communicate with somebody. I needed emotional support. I feel being institutionalized. It's a very hard cycle to break. Maybe that is something that we don't pay enough attention to in our resocialization programs. There's also that mental, emotional need of people. Some put it in this way: I needed a hug, a soft hand, a bit of advice, a warm blanket, a bed and a shower. Very basic needs, don't cost that much and sometimes so hard to find. Emotional support, I feel being in, oh, I already read that quote, I'm sorry. I needed counseling, I need help with rehabilitation and remaining drug-free. I needed someone to confide in and to be able to communicate with somebody. I needed a network of people who knew the struggles and had experienced them and could share stories and advice. As a conclusion, we said what keeps coming back through all this research is people need a home, people need meaningful activities as an income, but also to get out of their bed. People need mental health support and alcohol and drug support. Without giving you the time to read all these slides, we know from the numbers that all that is not available for people that come in the prison and that leave the prison, and that the situation is getting worse. At least that is the case in WA. I might hope that it's better here in New South Wales, but I'm not sure of that. I'm going to use my last 2 minutes to say that I think that nothing that I told here today is new to most of you in the room. So as a researcher, I'm asked to collect this evidence, and I think that is important. But then my ongoing question is like, what is the impact of what I do? How can I make a difference with doing the work that I'm doing? And I was just looking at the previous project that I did for Waxar, which was on women in prison. And that was quite a good outcome, I think. So we had some academic outputs. I'm sorry, my bills need to be paid as well. My university asked me to publish in academic journals, peer-reviewed journals, but also other journals. I give online classes. I go to every conference that I can afford to. But I think engagement is even more important. The biggest success that we had, uptake of people looking into the story that we wanted to tell, was the publication 800 Words in the Conversation, which was read by 19,700 people. And I now want you to all click on that so that it becomes 20,000. And then, because the media didn't pick it up, then we went to the press and we put an opinion piece in the West. I go to every agency that invites me to come and talk to them. I go to a Tupperware party if you invite me. I am for free, and everywhere where people want to listen to my story, I am very happy to go. So thank you for listening to me.
Thanks for that presentation, Hilde. Questions from the audience? If I may start us off, Hilde, that was a really good point about one of the key messages from that research being the importance of having shelter over your head every night, and it made me think about one of the quotes from some research that I've done in corrective services, interviewing people in prison serving short sentences, and the quote was from an Aboriginal woman, my participant. She said, "I realise I've been coming in here every winter," and that stayed with me from that study. I guess my question is, from that survey, the findings, it seemed as if whether people found the program and support helpful, it was a bit split. There were, about 50 yeses, some partially helpful, and then many people who also said no, it wasn't very helpful. And some of the reasons for that was because of feeling not ready for it, and that the timing of when that support was provided. What would that mean for people trying to design or improve on supports?
I'm going to answer to two aspects of your question. The first one, you saw that I referred to homelessness, to employment, to mental health and alcohol and drugs. Most of these very needed basic conditions are without of the reach of corrections. So corrections are actually serving as a shelter place for people that have far bigger problems than what they have programs available for. When I did the Women in Prison research, I was very, very sadly impressed with for how many women the prison is as good as it gets. It's a safe place for them where they have a bed and 3 meals a day, and that is as good as it gets. And that is because the society outside cannot provide them with actually the basic needs that they need. And that is me talking from WA, who is about the richest state in this very wealthy country already, but who actually, if I can put it bluntly, does not care about the more vulnerable in their population. We only care about the majority of us who is wealthy, and we actually cannot be bothered to provide enough housing and other services for the people that have a difficult life and end up in the criminal justice systems where the doors are always open because the prison does never say no to you. In looking at that complexity of life, knowing that about 40% of our prison population has even not been convicted, so they are on remand, so they don't have access to these programs, knowing that we are living in a situation of constant overpopulation and understaffing, where the majority of the time you can't even have access to these programs because you are locked up, because there's not enough staff to walk you to the program and back. knowing that the people say to me, like, we have waiting lists to go on a waiting list. I don't know what the programs are because I haven't had my orientation yet. I mean, this is unfolding the complexity, and then we say, like, oh, 50% don't think it's useful. It's just, it's not there. It's too hard to get. It's not accessible. It's not addressing your problems. We are trying to, I think, resolve a very, very difficult issue with a far too simplistic approach.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions from the floor? No? Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment regarding you saying that. Hi, I'd just like to make a comment with you regarding saying that women can regard corrections and prison as a safe space. I was listening to a talk this morning about intellectual disability, and I've worked in corrections and I now work on a post-release program, and we find regularly that people with intellectual disability, people with acquired brain injuries, which is not quantified in custody but is a high proportion, they find support in the structure and the routine and the lack of requirement to make difficult decisions or get their head around complex situations. It can be a safe space, and we find that some of those guys and women end up on short cycles. But within 4 weeks, because we do a 12-week post-release program, within 3 or 4 weeks, a fair proportion of people are saying, I'm sick of this, I want to go home. By home, they mean custody. It's safe. And I think that's a pretty terrible indictment. It's also the most expensive solution.
Totally, totally. I have heard that far too many times, and that does not make the prison a good thing, but that makes that our society, if the prison is better than the society out on the outside, then we have a huge problem.
My question is around that, more so where to next. You know, I guess we're talking about this approach to reintegration back into the community and into society, but where would be the next logical step as a part of this research for yourself, and any kind of, I guess, has there been consideration of any cost-benefit analysis to be undertaken around what could save?
I am going to plead totally against my own profession, but I don't think that we need any further research. I think we know everything we need to know. Just start implementing it.